TEEJ. Imagine you are watching the climactic battle of Empire Strikes Back, and this happens.
Obi-Wan never told you what happened to your father.
He told me enough. He told me you killed him.
No.
How would you feel? It's safe to assume it wouldn't be a popular technique. In fact, it probably wouldn't be a popular technique in many art forms. Television, theatre, books. Yet somehow this practice has become one of the defining techniques in gaming's last decade. Call it DLC, map packs, add-ons, cards, micropayments, microtransactions, loot boxes or loot crates. The requirement for customers to pay real-world money to receive content in a product they have already paid for is a controversial one. Nevertheless, it is widespread and has infiltrated so much of the gaming industry that no title or platform is safe. In this video, we will indeed be assessing microtransactions. We will be looking at how these in-game add-ons have spawned via technological and software developments. We will look at the studio that has organised this craze and how they have been able to profit greatly from microtransactions and in turn influencing the complete commercialisation of the video game medium.
And the game award goes to, oh man, I have to pay a microtransaction to unlock. That's so stupid that this has to, hold on, I got this, guys, here we go. You know it's true, it's really stupid. The winner, Wolf.
Before we explore the modern loot box, it's important we are aware of the historical context around games as a monetizable business. Ever since gaming's early origins, there has been a vital investment imperative that has relied on players spending real-world currency in order to receive a digital or play experience. Arcade machines have a history from the mid-1800s. Think penny arcade machines, non-electrical pinballs, slots, fortune tellers, love testers, and coin-operated shooter games, all funded from small investments from the player. Machines like this ultimately spotlight primitive gaming as an exciting and profitable business medium, hence why we saw the rise of the video game arcade in the 1970s, starting with games such as Space Invaders and going on to include classics like Pac-Man and Centipede. Alongside arcades came the growth of the home console. These systems would be responsible for shifting the common idea of gaming to something far more familiar to us, still to this day. As graphics on home consoles became ever more impressive and began to rival arcade machines, many gamers decided to stay at home and play. As more people chose to game in their homes, the industry and consumers had to question how much a game should cost. No longer would a handful of quarters or pennies be appropriate. Instead, players got used to the idea of spending large amounts of money up front for their games. It became a fact of life that gamers would get a full game for around $50 to $60. For years, gaming revolved around this formula. But as technology and software changed due to increased access to the internet, online play became an ever more important part of gaming, particularly the home console market. Developers began to realise that they didn't have to settle for a one-off payment. They could instead charge players small payments for in-game features, an effective strategy on paper. Players get more, and so do businesses, which are created in the interest of making money, and more importantly, profit. MOBAs began to move away from subscription models and focused on in-game microtransactions to fund their titles. EverQuest introduced micropayments to buy things like armor and potions as players got further into the game. League of Legends and Dota also traded a larger price tag for smaller transactions. From a surface level player perspective, this could be viewed as only a good thing. You could essentially get to play your favourite games for free if you are not inclined to purchase any in-game add-ons. And for studios, it meant they remove a maximum cap from money they would receive from a player's monthly subscription. The idea is that a game's most devoted fan would spend so much money they would cover the cost of lost subscription fees from players that chose not to spend in the game. This freemium title idea was also extremely popular on mobile. Many credit the mobile boom as being responsible for the return of a penny arcade style of payment. After all, the ability to download games for free meant that developers had to find profit elsewhere. Freemium titles such as Candy Crush Saga offer microtransactions in the form of additional lives to keep the game running. The exchange of a free game for in-game microtransactions is largely seen as a fair trade-off by gamers, although there are theories that games ramp up difficulty levels in order to have gamers spend more money to help them through these more challenging sections. However, where microtransactions really start to become controversial is when they impact player experience. Often developers will choose to keep sections of a game behind a paywall, sections intentionally cut out of a title in order to charge extra money for it. Street Fighter X Tekken is a notorious example of this practice. The game was set to include a dozen new additions to its roster, but those fighters had to first be purchased before being allowed to play with them. Another example is For Honor. In order to unlock everything in the game, you would need to pay $723 or have a playtime of 2.5 years, an impossible task for most. There is one company that has been more responsible than any other for the current hatred of microtransactions. They have been able to monetize almost their entire catalogue, which in many ways has been extremely profitable. The company in question has been responsible for shifting the gaming medium towards commercialization and not much else. Of course, we are talking about America's two-time worst company of the year, Electronic Arts, or
EA Sports. It's in the game.
To understand their effect on the gaming industry and the community, we have to go back to an unlikely source, a little title known as UEFA Champions League.
One lives like my brother, one like my brother-in-law. Comes all the way from New Orleans, going back to Arkansas. All day, there's no home day. All day, no home.
There are plenty of popular sports the world over, but nothing compares to football. There has been demand for video games based around the world's game, as long as there's been video games. In 1993, Electronic Arts acquired the exclusive rights to the FIFA license, allowing them to create what would remain the official video game of football forever. FIFA has become one of gaming's biggest franchises of all time. As of 2016, FIFA accounted for nearly 40% of EA's revenue. The company sold close to 15.5 million units of FIFA, with each unit earning around $121. These figures are important as it presents exactly why EA and much of the gaming industry is so indebted to UEFA Champions League. UEFA Champions was seemingly a spin-off of the main FIFA franchise, a clever marketing trick that allowed EA to take advantage of their football license. EA could use the same game engine to sell essentially the same game under a different license. A commercially savvy move by EA, which also offered them the space to trial new game modes and features to see how audiences would react. One of these new game modes was called FIFA Ultimate Team, which would be marketed as a collectible card game.
UEFA Champions League features a brand new mode which enables you to play football as never before. This new mode enables you to collect and trade virtual player and gameplay cards to build a team. You can then take your team to the pitch to compete for UEFA Champions League glory. So how does it work? In UEFA Champions League, the user will be rewarded with credits for their play throughout the game. Credits will be used to purchase packs of cards to build, train and maintain your ultimate team. Packs come in 3 varieties, bronze, silver and gold. Any card available in the game can be found in any type of pack. However, the better pack, the more likely you are to find the better cards.
The core progression system of the game would be entirely focused around loot box elements. You hope the right items would drop because if they did, you could build a perfect squad that could defeat any opponent you played against. Ultimate Team at this time didn't result in a more empty real-life wallet outside of the purchase of the game itself. You weren't asked to pay for cards, instead you would earn and open packs through gameplay. A few years later, during the development of UEFA Champions League 2009 to 2010, with no real-world revenue being generated from Ultimate Team and the UEFA franchise not being lucrative, EA chose to shelf development on the spin-off franchise and chose not to renew the UEFA license. However, Ultimate Team wouldn't be gone for long, as during the same time FIFA 2009 was in development, the creative director of FIFA suggested bringing the Ultimate Team concept to the FIFA franchise. A developer named Matt Pryor, who would go on to become creative director of FIFA, wrote a design paper for FIFA Ultimate Team and gave it to his executive producer. I wrote a design paper on that new space, and then we put that towards our executive producer at the time, who was Andrew Wilson, and to his credit, he saw potential in it, said Pryor. According to Pryor, Ultimate Team was showing a negative profit initially, but calculations were only based on unit sales, not the potential revenue from microtransactions for the purchase of card packs. It was Wilson who realised what Ultimate Team could become, and it was he who greenlit the mode. Wilson became the head of EA Sports Division in 2011, and would later become the CEO of EA. FIFA 2009 began to sell card packs, aka loot boxes, immediately. and therefore became the first pay-to-win game on home consoles. The core system revolved entirely around loot boxes, not cosmetic or freemium extras, but a system which revolved around the idea of spending more money to build a more powerful squad. These loot boxes were what players would come to fear. With the ability to add your credit card information to your gaming account, you could quickly spend a small fortune without even realising it. You were expected to. The FIFA Ultimate Team loot boxes would introduce us to a number of features that would prioritise profit over player experience in video games for the following decade. It all started here. Pay to win, progression based, and perhaps most worryingly, gambling based. When you go to open a pack of cards, you have no idea what you are going to receive. Ultimate Team has parallels with games like Magic the Gathering and Pokemon, minus the distinct advantage of real-world value for physical cards. Ultimate Team doesn't have this real-world value. You could buy a packet of Ultimate Team cards and you would be stuck with them, because you can't take them out of the Ultimate Team ecosystem and sell them for real money or trade them for other goods. It is a closed economy in which the manufacturer has complete monopoly over, able to set the rate in which rare cards drop and completely stop the resale of any of those drops outside of their own managed economy. It is this closed economy factor which makes the video game loot crate so lucrative, and in many ways has spotlighted the desire of publishers like EA to completely commercialise the medium. After all, the FIFA Ultimate Team loot box became such a successful and respected business model that it affected the entirety of EA. During development of Mass Effect 3, developers worked closely with FIFA Ultimate Team developers. In order to implement the first loot boxes designed around a profit imperative outside of a FIFA game, loot boxes have existed in AAA titles before this time, such as in the Borderlands franchise. However, the difference is Mass Effect lets you pay real money for these crates. One ex-BioWare employee stated examples of people spending upwards of $15,000 on Mass Effect loot crates, clearly spotlighting the potential profit of this new system. EA was also keen to include microtransactions in one of their Paramount mobile franchises. Mobile has typically been one of the leading markets for microtransactions, however the creator of Plants vs. Zombie pushed back against the inclusion of them in the sequel. Despite this, EA would push towards micro-monetizing their entire mobile lineup. The Simpsons got a freemium microtransaction-based release in the form of city-building game The Simpsons Tapped Out. As a free title, many justify the inclusion of microtransactions. So how is a play experience affected when you aren't asked to pay a one-time fee? So I've been playing this for a little while now, and at the absolute heart of this game are microtransactions. You know, it just doesn't work as an uninterrupted experience. It feels like a shallow cash grab. I mean, it could work maybe in breaks or in trains, or if you're leaving work in that sort of experience, but otherwise you have to wait for like an hour and half an hour. This is not an uninterrupted gaming experience. You're not immersed into what you're playing. It's constantly saying, look, it's going to take an hour for the next thing to happen, half an hour for the next thing to happen, and the only way for you to have that uninterrupted experience is for you to pay to speed up the process. Unless you put hours into the game, you're going to have to purchase the ability to do that. So the microtransactions and the micro add-ons and the payments are a core part of this game, and there's not really any experience here. It's extremely shallow, and it just feels like a cash grab. Tapped Out was largely free from controversy, which couldn't be said for the infamous release of The Dungeons Keepers in 2014. The backlash received from this game would only be outdone years later from another EA game set in a galaxy far, far away. Dungeons Keepers, a beloved franchise, would now become a shadow of its former self. Focused around a completely pay-to-win system, profit was imperative above all else. A review of the game called it a cynically motivated skeleton of a non-game, a scam that will take your cash and offer nothing in return, a perversion of a respected series twisted by some of the most soulless and selfish and nauseating human beings ever to blight the game industry. CEO Andrew Wilson, who was the man responsible for greenlighting FIFA Ultimate Team, commented on the controversy surrounding the game, saying, You have to be very careful when you reinvent IP for a new audience that has a particular place in the hearts and minds and memories of an existing audience. He added that he personally offered feedback of his own to EA developers following the release of the game. Alas, his comments were hollow and couldn't be revolved around the removal of pay-to-win elements, as EA could see how much profit revenue was pouring in. In the background, FIFA Ultimate Team was becoming ever more popular. In 2010 and 2011 combined, FIFA Ultimate Team had brought in a total of $100 million. By 2013 it was $200 million, and by 2014 it was $380 million. This wasn't the sale of FIFA itself, this was the revenue gained from the FIFA Ultimate Team add-on, in which players had to purchase packs of electronic cards. FIFA Ultimate Team continues to shine as EA's premium pay-to-win system, and therefore was deeply ingrained into every one of their sports titles. By March of 2017, FIFA Ultimate Team had become an $800 million business for EA, making it still, to this day, the most successful integration of microtransactions in any AAA title. Although there has been critics of the FIFA Ultimate Team pay-to-win formula from industry experts and the gaming community, the mainstream perception of FIFA Ultimate Team has been widely positive, even spawning a new type of spectator experience in which players showcase their pack openings in videos that have a similar feel to gambling in Vegas. There is a certain level of disconnect that may allow these videos to seem completely harmless. After all, we are able to watch often wealthy internet personalities spend in hopes of gaining a player to improve their squad, offering a vicarious play experience in which our wallets will not suffer. The problem is these YouTubers can edit their videos to include less of them losing money on bad players and more of the rare items and players. After all, a rare, messy pack opening title is certain to help them regain any revenue lost.
Please! Oh my God! No! 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 It's back me! It's back me! It's back me! Who gives a shit?
Ladies and gentlemen, I cannot believe I'm saying this, but after thousands of pounds, the hours of opening packs, we've got 99 messages.
Audiences could then gain a false sense of optimism that results in them gambling far more away. There was certainly an anti-microtransaction sentiment growing in the gaming community. However, except from a few controversies revolving around the pay-to-win formula, EA was able to avoid any mainstream backlash and was largely free from taking blame for the rise of the new selfish way to play. That was all until they began to develop for one of the largest and most passionate fan bases the world over.
Star Wars belongs to everyone who loves this amazing universe. We've all grown up with it. And now, we at DICE have the opportunity of a lifetime to make the Star Wars game that, as fans, we've all dreamt of playing.
EA obtained the Star Wars license from Disney and LucasArts in May of 2013 and had a teaser trailer ready for the reboot of Star Wars Battlefront a month later. Visceral Studios was also tasked with creating a Star Wars single-player game working under the title Star Wars Ragtag. The title was being developed under the leadership of Amy Hennig, who had previously headed up the Uncharted franchise. Hennig wasn't used to working with a corporation like Electronic Arts. Despite being owned by electronic giant Sony, Naughty Dog was able to operate by itself, in large part because they were widely perceived as the corporation's prestige video game studio. At EA, however, things were different. When presenting the story themes to EA executives, one higher-up said FIFA Ultimate Team can make $1 billion a year. Where's your version of that? If you're asking these kind of questions in relation to a single-player Star Wars adventure game, it's clear that the cold capitalistic rot has taken over. EA viewed the Star Wars license as nothing more than a revenue maker and had no desire to put the pursuit of profit aside in order to create a game Star Wars fans would be excited about. It's important to note that these points don't have to be mutually exclusive endeavours either. Many pop culture licenses have been able to obtain critical and commercial success outside of the microtransaction formula. Additionally, Star Wars fans were clamouring for a new solo experience for well over a decade, and with the added point of all the media released under the Star Wars umbrella offering a canonised story that adds to the mythology of the galaxy far, far away, the excuse that Star Wars Ragtag would not be successful would have to be excused. EA released Star Wars Battlefront in 2015, which was heavily criticised for its lack of launch day content, but of course EA would kindly offer players downloadable map packs and content to help maintain attention over the game's lifecycle. However, this would only be available for those who wanted to pay for the extension. EA's decision destroyed Battlefront's community as players with the new maps were unable to play with those without the content. At the heart of Battlefront was a brilliant and beautiful Star Wars simulator that offered players the opportunity to relive their childhood fantasies. However, with such little content, these fantasies were only to be experienced in small doses. Ultimately, the main consensus was that if EA was able to provide players with more content, more modes, and that the content wouldn't disrupt the player base, the Battlefront franchise could be an amazing Star Wars experience. In March of 2017, CGO Mike Jorgensen said in an interview discussing that FIFA Ultimate Team was an $800 million business, he stated, like Battlefield, Battlefront are Star Wars games which are very similar in depth of play. We can possibly add a similar mechanic to that. We spend a lot of time thinking about it, he said. Not for tomorrow, but over the next couple of years you're going to see a lot more of that in our portfolio. Despite these comments, players were quietly optimistic about the next Battlefront title. EA had promised that any future map packs would be downloadable for free for all players. Additionally, Battlefront 2 would include a full single-player campaign with an original Star Wars storyline that would work into the overall canon of the universe. Perhaps EA had finally learned its lesson and was truly dedicated to offering players with a Star Wars experience that wasn't ruined by the prodding requirement of real-world purchases. The release of Battlefront 2 will forever remain in the history books, and not for positive reasons. It is one of the largest gaming controversies ever. The gaming community completely turned against EA.
Fucking loot crates. With Star Wars Battlefront 2, it's pay to win. It's pay to win. That's right, it's pay to win.
Yeah, as long as you didn't mind playing for 40 hours. 40 fucking hours. Good God, that's nearly 2 days of constant grinding just to unlock a black robot guy with a triangle for a mouth.
You would think being voted worst company in America twice would be enough for EA to realize their wrongdoings and make some serious changes to the way they operate.
The type of system that you would find in a free-to-play game.
It's important to note here this was not a community angry at the game, or even the developers who had obviously worked tirelessly to create a fantastical and faithful Star Wars universe. This was a community rising up against a dark force, a greedy corporation, who had tricked and manipulated consumers for far too long. EA released Battlefront 2 November 17th, 2017, and yes, implemented into the core progression system was those infamously profitable loot boxes, available to purchase in all of their Ultimate Team glory. The multiplayer progression system was met with widespread criticism because of the dependency on loot crates.
Having grown up in the company, I had a pretty good sense of the company. While from the outside looking in, it looked like we were in a really, really bad place. And so what we did was we sat down and we said, okay, now every time you have to make a decision, every time you sift through some level of information, or you have to try and think about how to move some initiative forward, ask yourself this question first. Is this good for the player? 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 Is this good for the player?
EA had made a gameplay loop that didn't value playtime or player investment. Players who used real money to purchase loot boxes had a substantial advantage in a PvP environment. In comparisons, estimates showed that players who didn't purchase loot boxes would have to play for 40 hours to unlock a single hero or villain character. Reddit user MBM Maverick posted that he had purchased the game's deluxe version for $80 and was still unable to play as Darth Vader. He went on to describe the current climate of gaming as the age of the microtransaction. EA's official community Reddit account replied to that thread, reasoning that the cost and playtime to unlock characters was so high in order to give players a sense of pride and accomplishment. The response would go on to become the most downvoted comment in Reddit history, at the time of writing receiving 667,814 downvotes. In response to the outcry, EA decided to remove microtransactions from the game until, quote, changes were made. Additionally, the cost of each hero was cut by 75%. However, the number of credits received from completing the campaign was also cut by 75%. Although EA implemented the changes to the title, it might not have been their decision, According to the Wall Street Journal, a number of key executives at Disney, including CEO Bob Iger, were highly concerned about the community backlash against one of their key properties. The entire controversy caused EA's stock to drop by 2.5% on the game's launch date. The backlash against EA and Battlefront wouldn't just be heard from a community and financial level. Several governments would too express concerns about loot boxes. In November 2017, the Belgian Gaming Commission began an investigation into the loot box system, concluding that they were indeed gambling. Belgium's Minister of Justice, Koen Jeans, would go on to state, "We will certainly try to ban it." Since the release of Battlefront 2, representatives from the state of Hawaii would also speak out about the loot box system, looking into legislation to regulate microtransactions in games for underage players.
We are here today to ensure future protections for kids, youth, and everyone when it comes to the spread of predatory practices in online gaming and the significant financial consequences that it can have on families and has been having on families around this nation. This game is a Star Wars themed online casino designed to lure kids into spending money. It's a trap.
So what I'm going to do is jump into some multiplayer, as that was always the subject of the controversy. I'm going to go into a 40-player match and just see how it plays now. I kind of want to know if it's still based on pay-to-win features and microtransactions, or if me, on a new account as a new player, can jump in and have just as much fun. So we're searching for a match currently. I'm also interested in what the player base is like. Is this a game that people have abandoned like I did? No, we're into a game. That's interesting, actually. We're going to Kashyyyk, which is a new world. That's interesting. I thought there would maybe be a longer wait time to get into a match, but I'm straight in, so I applaud that. I'm happy there's still a community. Obviously, it's Star Wars, so there's always going to be sort of a community there, ain't too much. So all the hero characters are still unlocked, but I want to see how I have to operate in gameplay to be able to play as one, and if I can play as anyone, because normally you had to unlock them through hours and hours and hours of gameplay. Just something that wasn't going to be possible for many players. So here we go. Oh, this is beautiful. Oh, this is great. The frames, but I mean, we're here. We are playing Star Wars on Kashyyyk, and okay, right. Okay, this is what we're dealing with. The Kingdom of the Wookiees. I'm getting shot, and I don't know quite where. I just feel like I feel like I'm in a war. This is crazy. Right, so I'm now being allowed to play all this. This is great. So, I mean, I haven't had a single kill yet, and I've already been sort of rewarded with a sort of different experience. I mean, I am a walking target in this thing, but it's super cool. We got a kill, and whoa, who is that? All right, Count Dooku is on the battlefield. This is amazing. I kind of want to. Oh wow, this is cool. Look at this world. Look at this. This is Star Wars. Look at the explosions, the firefights.
I was shocked about how immersed I found myself in the world of Battlefront 2. I played for hours without encountering a single pesky microtransaction or loot crate. Every character was playable, and I felt I had an incredible amount of content at my fingertips. Battlefront 2 was now a far superior game than when it first launched. I hope that EA had actually learned some lessons and were going to implement them moving forward. Perhaps then the industry that they had influenced would also follow suit. Are video games a completely commercialised medium? Perhaps now more than ever that statement is true. But after such a public backlash, I don't believe this is going to be the case for much longer. Microtransactions were profitable, but too controversial to remain a mainstay in AAA titles. EA had already started to mend their relationship with consumers, stating that their next Star Wars title would be Loot Crate and microtransaction free.
It is. It's a single-player story game. We worked really closely. Yes.
Hey, Vince,
no multiplayer, no microtransactions. It's a story game.